coordinate this and keeping everybody straight for the last 3 days. So thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Sherry Miles. She's the program manager for the Down Payment Assistance Program.
All right. So, for those of you who have worked with me before, I've been with DHCD for about 15 years now, and I do work with a lot of the homebuyer programs. I've worked with the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. I'm aging myself there. I also work with the Acquire, Renovate, Sell program, and last fall, started working with the Down Payment Assistance Program. It got moved over into PAAO, and also working with Sabrina, who you just heard talk about VITA. We quickly realized that the programs, although they were within the same agency, they just didn't play that well together. And so what we kind of set out doing over the winter and into the January and February of this year is looking for ways that we can kind of align those programs so that they can be used together by an LMI applicant to purchase their first home. And, fingers crossed, we are very excited to kind of talk about that today and to let everybody know that that is what we've strived for, and we think we've hit a pretty good balance here. So, you can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so again, today we're going to talk about down payment assistance and what that looks like. And just to let everybody know, the down payment assistance program that DHCD runs is out of the HUD program, the home program. So not only do we have state rules to follow, but we have federal rules to follow on this program. So it makes it a little bit more dicey when you're trying to align it with a state program. But again, Sabrina and I work some magic, and I think we have a really good system now. Okay, next slide. All right, our down payment program, what is the goal of our program? One, what is DPA? So it is not a grant. It is a deferred loan where we actually place a lien against the property for the amount of the down payment assistance that's provided at closing. And we do that because we're providing an opportunity for our first-time home buyers to obtain homes that are safe, decent, and affordable. And you've heard us use that term throughout the presentations over the last few days. Susan talked about it in lead. We want homes that are safe. We want homes that are decent. And with DPA, we're trying to make them also more affordable for everyone. Because our long-term goal is to create not only that personal wealth, but create generational wealth and create equity for low to moderate income home buyers. Next slide. Okay, now, everybody who has ever written a PowerPoint knows you cannot fit everything you want to say on a tiny little screen. So this is not all encompassing on what a borrower's eligibility is. But what we talk about here is that for DPA, a client must be a first-time home buyer. They must meet income guidelines and credit underwriting criteria. And in a very general sense, that is 80% AMI, which is area median income or under, and a 620 minimum FICO credit score. And then we also look at property eligibility. So what I want to do is break those down just a little bit. Just like Sabrina said, our first-time home buyer is a person who has never purchased a home or has not owned a property that they have lived in for the last 3 years or had ownership in a principal residence during those last 3 years. Okay, so we truly take in the definition that Virginia Housing has created, and that's accepted now with both programs. Second thing we do is, of course, we have to meet income guidelines and credit criteria. So income guidelines, if you go out to a mortgage company and it's a husband and wife buying a home, and maybe the wife doesn't have the best credit, so the bank says, we're not going to use her credit, we're not going to use her income, the husband qualifies all by himself. And he can go on that loan by himself. Well, with federal rules, we have to look at everyone's income in the household that is over the age of 18. So if they have an adult child living in the home, we're going to look at that income. If there is SSI or disability payments coming into that home, if there's retirement income coming into that home, all of that gets looked at to see if they are still under that or 80% or under of that area median income. And again, there are caveats to each of these. For example, if the child is in higher education but has a part-time job on the weekends, we're not going to count that. So there's give and take on those, but these are the general guidelines of the program. And the other thing is we look at 620 on a minimum FICO credit score in order to be eligible for DPA. That we look at that annually. We look at that depending on what the market is for current first trust loans, their mortgage that they'd have to go out and get, because we want to kind of stay in line with that. And Sabrina talked about that to join VITA, we now have a 580 minimum score. Okay, because you have to be in that program for at least 4 months, and her average applicant stays about 12 to 16 months. That 580 can easily become 620 by the time they have graduated VITA and are actually ready to go under contract. So again, we're trying to use those two to work together to assist that family to allow them to use both of these programs. The other thing we look at is property eligibility. This is one of the few programs that does allow mobile homes as a purchase. We do have year restrictions on them. They're allowed to purchase a manufactured home. They're allowed to purchase a modular or a stick-built home. They can purchase in a duplex if they are purchasing one side. So there are some property eligibility. And again, as we were talking with Susan earlier, she mentioned lead. I said, could lead be used with DPA? Yes, it can. Because what if that property is a pre-1978 and during the home inspection it has lead? Well, a lot of sellers, they're not going to say, oh, well, yeah, we'll give you 4 months and you can come in while you don't own the house and do the lead. No. But once the borrower closes on the home, they may have a way to reach out and apply for that lead assistance, okay, on that home, which would give that borrower not only an affordable home, but a very safe and probably lead-free home. So we have that on the property eligibility as well. What we don't want is a client going in and buying an as-is home that's literally falling down around them, because as an LMI applicant, what you don't want to see is they get in and before their first payment is even due, or maybe they're only making their second or third payment, the hot water heater breaks, the roof leaks, the gutters are falling off, they've got mold. So there are requirements in this program that try and protect the borrower as much as possible. And that's why it's so critical that we do look at the property eligibility with this. Next slide. Okay, some of the guidelines we have. So how does it work? DPA is provided directly to the DPA provider, and they send that money to the closing table for closing. The borrower can receive up to 10% of the sales price. And in some counties that are considered high cost or economically distressed, it's 15%. We will actually post the table with all of the counties in it with this presentation on our landing page for the grant management workshop so that people can go in and check the counties. The maximum we're allowing on this program has been reduced as of this year, 2024, and it's now $40,000 per home. That includes the down payment assistance and closing cost assistance. So what are we talking about there? Home DPA allows closing cost assistance with the down payment assistance. So let's say that borrower needs, $15,000 in down payment, but they're short $2,000 in closing costs. Then that borrower, if they're eligible, can receive the full $10,000 for down payment and receive the $2,000 in closing costs for a total of $12,000. Now that $12,000 shows on that deed of trust that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So if your client is receiving closing costs, the full $2,500, of course, that's subtracted from the 40, so they would only be eligible for $37,500 in down payment assistance. Does anybody have any questions so far? I want to kind of take them as we go along to see if we can answer anything for anyone. Okay.
I don't see anything, Sherry, in chat or hands.
Great. All right. So next slide. All right. The role of the DPA provider, our partners in the field, and without you all, we this program would not go anywhere. We get around $1.5 billion a year in an annual allocation from HUD. In years where we have a little bit left over, we try and roll that into the program. And what we have is, like I said, normally it's 1.5 million. Occasionally it may be up to 2 million. This year we are actually looking at, we did have some funding left over. So we are actually looking at what we can allocate for this year. So that's exciting. And that number will probably be coming out in May. But all of our current DPA providers have received their contract for 2024. And with the 1.5. And we will discuss additional allocations as we move into the summer. So again, what is the role of the DPA provider? Well, the DPA provider is going to perform an initial intake with that home buyer. It could be a phone call, it could be a walk-in. If you have your website set up to take them in through that, you can do that. Nikki, you had a question?
Go ahead.
Okay.
It'll wait. It had to do with your last slide. Is 2,500 a closing cost example of the maximum? And I think I answered that it is. That is the most in closing costs you can get.
Yes, that is the most that they can receive for closing costs from this program. It is. Okay, so they're going to take that intake, and I will say this: our DPA providers a lot of them are the same as the VITA intermediaries. They work in both programs, and these people are experts at what they do. They know, after talking with that client, sometimes before they've ever seen the paperwork to back up what the client's telling you, they're going to know they're lender ready or they need some work, right? And so they're going to perform that initial intake and determine pretty quickly, are you mortgage ready? Are you not mortgage ready? If they're not mortgage ready, they're probably going to start working with a housing counselor, that HUD housing counselor that Sabrina talked to you about, that's going to help them get to the point that they're lender ready. Okay. Maybe their credit score isn't at 620. Maybe they've got some collections or something they've got to work on their credit. Maybe their income isn't there and they need to work on that. Maybe they've never dealt with a spending plan in their life. So they're going to learn to create one and live with one. So all of those things are worked on after our provider does that initial intake. If they feel the client is lender ready, and I will say this, just because they call in and say, I've got a contract and I'm closing next Friday, does not mean that they're lender ready. They do sometimes jump the gun a little bit. So what our providers are going to do at that point is they're going to start collecting the documentation. They've got to see if they're eligible. And it truly is like a mini underwriting. Okay. It's not something where you just collect paperwork and rubber stamp it. All of our providers have the background, have the expertise to do this. They're going to look at income, and they're going to look at pay stubs. They're going to look at W-2s. They're going to look at tax returns. They're going to look at, Social Security statements. They're going to look at disability statements. They're going to look at retirement statements, and they're going to determine if that income meets that 80% or under AMI for that county or that city based on the number of people in that family. Then they're going to look at assets, and they're going to go over those assets and make sure that, again, they meet the qualifications of the down payment program. So I see a couple of questions coming in. Are the current DPA providers listed on the website? Yes. That list is being updated. In fact, the whole DPA landing page is being updated because we're updating forms, guidelines, and everything else. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And Marion says, so if they already have a contract to buy, they may still be eligible. Yes. Yes, if they have not closed yet and they're not trying to close tomorrow. I know the DPA providers need at least, I'm going to say 30 to 45 days, and you all come in and correct me if it's taking longer. Please jump in and let me know. But yes, generally, if they're 30 to 45 days out, we try very hard to work with them. But back to the eligibility, they're going to, again, like I said, they're going to look at assets. They're going to collect 3 months of bank statements. They're going to go through them. Are there any NSF charges? Are there any large deposits that cannot be explained? So when I say it's truly a mini underwriting, it is, and it's not something that they can quickly go through. They've got to take their time and go through each client. And if there's only a few of them doing in that office, they can get a backlog. So, we tell our potential home buyers to be patient, and, DHCD tries to give them all the grace we can because we know that they do such a hard job. They're also going to look at liabilities. They're going to look at the credit report. They're going to see what's going on there. Do they have student loans? Do they have a car payment? Are any payments under 9 months or left? And then again, they're going to look at property eligibility. So that's something that comes into play. With that, they are going to work with a HUD housing counselor. Now, some of our providers have a HUD housing counselor on staff. And if they do, that potential home buyer is going to go through the home buyer education class. They're going to go through the budgeting and housing counseling. They're going to create spending plans. And again, with Sabrina and I working together, we have aligned these class requirements to be the same on VITA and the down payment assistance program. Because what we didn't want to have happen is someone go take a class in VITA and come back to DPA and the counselor says, oh, well, that's nice, but you have to take my class. That frustrates a home buyer. It can cause a lot of miscommunication. So they now match. If you take them under DPA, it meets the VITA requirement. If they take them under VITA, it meets the DPA requirement. Okay. And the homebuyer education class, and I'm just going to ask this very quickly. How many of our participants on this session have ever taken the HUD or the Virginia Housing Homebuyer Education class? See 3. 4, 5, 6. 6 is a very lonely number from 54. I would say this, even if you own a house and a bunch of rental properties, if you have not taken the class and you work in homeownership education or home buyer programs, I highly suggest that you all take it. Now, if you own your own home and you do this all day long, yes, you can take the online course, but it is really beneficial to go take it in person. I taught it for years, and I know several of our providers teach the class in person or offer online classes. It is so eye-opening to take it and to hear about all the different aspects of homeownership. and to see the questions, the reason I say take it live, to see the questions that these potential home buyers who until yesterday had no idea what a home inspection was, have no idea what a real estate agent does. What is a loan? What is points? What is a closing cost? All of those things come into play in the homeownership education classes, and I could not highly recommend it enough.
Sherry, Stewart asked if they're required to use a real estate agent.
So no, they can, let me back up. The potential home buyer, normally 99% of the home buyers come through with a real estate agent. Okay. Occasionally, as Sabrina mentioned, there are some of our nonprofits and housing authorities that have affordability housing programs, and they would actually go directly into the the provider's website or come into their office, and they would lay out, okay, we've built on Oak Street and we have 4 properties in our affordability program, and they would actually sign a contract directly with the provider. So sometimes a realtor is not used. However, in most instances, especially when they call up and say, I've got a contract and I want to close, May 30th, they usually have a realtor involved. And yes, the market is changing, Stuart. I am watching that very carefully, and so is Sabrina, on how that is going to affect our home buyers, and what that's going to, what is the new landscape going to look like with real estate agents, and we will keep everyone up to date as well. Next question.
Erlene says SOG has 2 HUD counselors.
Yes, you do.
And
uh-huh.
so Gwen asked, will there be a general list of what property eligibility encompasses? I usually say up to HUD standards and then review the home inspection, but if there can be a generalized list, it would be much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Gwen. That is very good information. And I'm going to add that because we have a training announcement coming up, and we will make sure that that is covered in our training. But yes, you're absolutely right. We do need to have a generalized list of what that's going to look like, especially with HUD announcing that they are doing some changing with the HUD standards. Coming up, they're looking at different things, and they're even talking about a program, I believe it's called Inspire, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that we're watching as well, because that may affect what we look at in the near future.
And then Lori states Virginia housing classes require a housing counselor, realtor, and lender to do the class.
Yes, absolutely, Lori, they do. I was years ago in another life, I was the Virginia housing counselor that put the classes on, and I always had a realtor and lender with me as well, and usually a home inspector way back when. So we did do those live, and that's it's so critical to hear, like I said, to hear about the different aspects of what goes on in the class, what can be learned, and the takeaways. In person, it's so much easier for that potential home buyer to be able to ask those questions, and it gives them a chance to really get that information, kind of go home and decipher it, because then they're coming back to meet with that HUD housing counselor. And they've got a list of questions. I used to get people in my office who said, I took your class last month, and then they'd get their notebook out. And I was like, okay, let's go. So, classes are very, very educational. And like I said, I can't recommend it enough, just so you see what your home buyers are taking and what information they're learning, because it is incredible information that they're getting. And
I was going to say, Kirsten commented that years ago in another life, she said she was the assistant manager of HO education at VHDA and taught the train the trainer class.
Then I might have taken your class, Kristen. I took a lot of those train the trainer classes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, after the, like I said, after you work with the housing council and everything else, The other thing that the DPA provider does is, they wear a lot of hats. Kelly in her planning grant, put the different hat on. Unfortunately, it's not in today's economy and society. It's a fact of life. So our providers work with the home buyer and, very nervous, don't even know what questions they should ask, don't know what things they don't know, right? At that point, they have to talk to the first trust lender, the mortgage company, because they're going to be sharing information back and forth. They have to talk to the realtor. They have to talk to the title company. Dates have to be set. Things have to be submitted. Everybody has to be on the same page. The deed for the down payment assistance has to be created and sent to the closing table. And on top of that, then they have to submit all of the documentation into CAMS at DHCD, which is our software system. So there's a lot to do, a lot of plates in the air, but it's such a rewarding program that, we're just, like I said, we're just so thrilled about it. Next slide. Okay. Speaking of that, if I haven't scared you all off, if there are any groups out there that think that they might want to apply for a DPA, to become a DPA provider, in CAMS right now, the application is open and it will be open through May 3rd. I know a few of you have already submitted your applications. This week, I have not had a chance to review them. Been a little busy, but next week we will start reviewing the ones that are already submitted. But like I said, that will close on the 3rd. All right, next slide. So for our current down payment assistance providers, what kind of things have we looked at updating? And this is, like I said, this is not a complete list. This just gives you some ideas. So again, our maximum is going to be $40,000 from 2024 forward. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. One, if someone comes in and purchases a $650,000 house, 10% could be upwards of $65,000. That could eat up the down payment very, very quickly and not allow us to get to some of the rural areas or more low-income areas. So we wanted to cap it. We chose 40,000 because that gives us a maximum of a 10-year affordability period with our deeds. Unless my retirement account goes very, very badly, I may not be here in 15 years to make sure that deeds are still out there. So we have set that at 5 and 10 years, the period of affordability. We follow the home guidelines so that if the client receives 15,000 or under, it's 5 years on the deed. If they receive $15,001 up to $40,000, it is 10 years on the deed of trust. And with that deed of trust, of course, if they sell the home, if they refinance the home, that's a cash out refinance. If they move and try and rent it out and are caught, all of the DPA funds are due back. It is not prorated. So if they received $18,000 4 years ago and sell the home, they're going to owe $18,000 back. There's no payments, no interest, but they do owe the full amount back. Next slide. Okay, with the guidelines continuing, so DHCD has expanded the lenders to any lender licensed to operate in Virginia moving forward. So that allows a lot more lenders to come in and work with us. But we have had some requests from third-party brokers. We don't want to work with third-party brokers. We will work with licensed lenders. So, it no longer has to be Virginia Housing. It can be any lender that's licensed. What we're trying to do is to approve the type of loan that our home buyers are receiving to protect them. So what we're looking for is loans that are USDA, VHDA, now Virginia Housing, VA loans if the client is a veteran, conventional loans, FHA loans, or Habitat. Habitat does some of their own lender financing, and that's okay. We've looked at their information. And there's an asterisk there, because if you have a lender that is going to offer the same type of structure, then we would be happy to look at them. If it is an employer, if it is a PDC, if it's a housing authority, something along those lines, we'd be happy to look at that information and see if that first trust loan could be approved as well. But what we're looking for is we're looking for loans that are fixed rate in term, 20 years up to 38. Some of the programs will go as far as 38 years. But what we're not going to allow is adjustable rates, negative amortizations, anything that's interest only, and subprime rates. If you know that the rates are, 6.75 to 7.25, and that's about average, and your borrower, your potential home buyer, comes in with a good faith estimate at 10%, red flags should be going up. So, we're not going to out and out define subprime rate right now because the interest rates are fluctuating, but we certainly don't want to see something that's at 10 if everything else is at 6.75, because that's just setting that borrower up for failure.
Sherry, Gwen says that she sends out a verification letter to families to verify occupancy and remind them of the years of affordability.
That is wonderful. I love that you do that. That's a really great idea. And it does. It does remind them, hey, you've been in the home 7 years. You've got 3 more years to go. Congratulations. You're almost there. Hope everything's going well. That's great. That's fantastic. All right. Next slide. Okay. This is the training I was talking about. For our current DPA providers, and if they are not on the call, don't worry about it. We will be sending out an invitation for this. Our training is going to be May 22nd from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon. It will be virtual, so you all don't have to travel anywhere. But what we're going to be covering is we have updated some of the forms for 2024, hopefully simplifying them for you so that you're not filling out the information over and over again on 2 or 3 forms. We are providing CAMS templates, updated CAMS templates for setups and completions. We're going to discuss completing the environmental property review. We're going to go over contract amendments and budgets and how that works, especially if we reallocate some older funding. And we are going to discuss general questions and answers. And Gwen, your question was great. So we will go ahead and add that information to that training as well, as far as guidelines, property guidelines. All right.
It looks like Gwen also asked, what or who are third-party brokers?
I have been contacted by, and I'll give you an example. I was contacted by a firm in Texas who said, we offer mortgages in Virginia. So I asked for their Virginia mortgage ID license information. Oh, we don't have one. We use this broker so-and-so, he uses it under his, then he sells us the servicing. Well, then you're a servicer. You're not a lender. That broker is the servicer, and tying that broker down is difficult. So we see them, they're not an everyday thing, but if you get questions on them, you are more than welcome to refer them to me. And if we can't identify who they are, then no, they would not be allowed to participate. Does that answer the question? Okay, so, let's see. Like I said, the training information will go out. We'll get that out early next week, so you can get that on your calendars. And you're more than welcome to invite more than just the one person. You can have as many people as you want from your office attend the GPA training. Next slide. All right. That is my contact information. And if there are no further questions, we are going to go right into the next session. I'm just going to stop the recording on this one. Oh, there is a question. Okay. Let's see. On loan products, a Virginia housing lender provided their own private product at a very attractive rate of 3.5. This was extremely helpful for some of our buyers. Would that be a lender to consider? Yes, very much so, especially if it meets us, if it's a fixed rate, if it's not a subprime, if it's not interest only, if it's not an adjustable. Yes, there are lenders out there that have, I'm going to age myself. We used to call them shelf products, and the lender won't sell them. They won't sell them on the secondary marketing. They'll hold them so they can offer really attractive products. And if that's the case and it fits our parameters, every day, all day, if it helps our home buyers, yes. Brenda, you have another question?
Is it okay if I
Of
just
course.
ask? Okay.
Go ahead.
So my next question is, we have a couple of clients to set up in camps. I mean, and so since the forms will not be available until later, so we're still using then the 2020.
Yes. Yes.
The
Still use
previous
the old
year?
setup form. Yeah. Still use the old setup form. If you have difficulties pulling that down, then it is fine right now to scan the whole package in and send it in until we upload the updated forms. Yes.
Okay, and I think I caught all the new changes, but okay.
She's going to cover them all. And I will say that some of you are already putting them in, and some of you are just zipping your packages and putting them in, which kind of really does work. If you can't make the form work for
Yes.
you, you can upload it as a zip file. I usually look at those for Sherry. This is Nikki. So just FYI, just kind of wanted to let you know, because already some of you have already started doing that. I've seen several in the last few days.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And like I said, we're going to go right into the fun presentation now, which is all about how these products work in real life. So I'm going to stop this recording and start the new recording. If we can